Welcome back to the Jupiter podcast. I'm your host, Tom Franklin, and today we have on Bob Hicks and his fiancee, Brittany Clark, from Tales from the Dark podcast. And we're going to get into, podcasting and what makes us do what we do, why we enjoy, uh, you know, the paranormal, UFOs and cryptids. And I don't know, maybe they've been doing this, it looks like, for a bit longer than I have. So do me a favor right now, go over and subscribe to their channel. And do me a favor and subscribe to my channel. I also am to be found on Rumble, and I'm also to be found on Spotify as well. And I also have myself a little PayPal link at the bottom if you want to give me a little bit of help so I can update my equipment. Anyhow, without further ado, let's welcome to the Jupiter podcast, Tales from the Dark.
Hey, how's it going today? You doing all right?
Oh, like I told you, I just before I had my battery stolen, so that was a whole day's pay just went down the drain. But other than that, I'm doing okay. I'm just happy, to meet you guys. I mean, I guess you're telling me you're having a little bit of video difficulties today, or something changed, or
Yeah, so we recently moved studios, so we're still trying to get everything back up and running, to its full potential, where we usually are in our studio. We usually do an audio only podcast over on Spotify, Apple. Basically, if it's a podcatcher, we're on it somewhere.
cool. Yeah, so I guess we'll go right into the questions. So, I mean, so how long have you been doing this, and what got you started in doing?
So we've been Brittany, 3 years now, 4 years.
Going on 4.
Yeah, going on 4 years since Tales from the Dark was created. We don't have the typical cool origin story of every other podcast. Ours started with the pandemic and a payphone, and we are 4 years later. So the Tales from the Dark origin story is one that we've told quite a few times. But the gist of it is, I was working security for the past decade, and one day at work, I had the idea of I think I want to start a YouTube channel. This is before the podcast was even a thing. We didn't even really, we didn't really consume many podcasts apart from like maybe Joe Rogan on the wild occasion. And I came home one day and I asked Brittany, I'm like, hey, what would you think if we invest all of our extra income and an income we might not have into starting a YouTube channel? And neither of us come from a content background. I'd done some like gaming YouTube stuff prior, and Brittany had, she wasn't a content creator, wasn't even really into high strangeness as a whole, funnily enough. And, she supported me 100%, said, yep, let's give it a shot. And, we'll kind of see where the rabbit hole goes. And I had discovered this weird internet ARG, had to do with payphones and a bunch of weird stuff. And, most spouses are like, yeah, let's do something normal. Like, can't you be like, like smoked meats or World War II history or something? And, for me, it was a payphone that kind of reawakened this childlike fascination with the paranormal. And
Okay.
here we are, 4 years later, and we've had everyone from Geraldine Sutton on the podcast to, Alan Greenfield, who's one of the godfathers of ufology and the occult, in my opinion. And it's just been an amazing ride to, every time we do one of these podcasts and we have to introduce ourselves, I'm always kind of shocked when I look up and see a signed Bob Lazar poster in our studio. It's kind of went off the rails extremely quickly, and we've had a great time.
Yeah, and same thing's been happening with me. I've been doing this for more than a year, but actually on my own since February, my birthday actually. You think I would remember that? And I had on the Sierra Sounds. What is his name? Oh, I'm drawing a blank. The guy who created, or not created, who recorded the Sierra Sounds. And that blew me away. The people out there are going to kill me right now, but you know who it is. He just had a birthday. He's like 80 something or other. And he came on, and I was, looking back, I was like, I was able to, get this guy on. And it was just an incredible thing. And he was promoting a book, and it's been a wild ride for me as well. So you had a fascination as a child. Maybe you can go into that a little bit. Ron Moorhead, excuse me. Ron Moorhead is his name. There we go.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, I'll let Brittany kind of answer for herself with the paranormal, because she had like she said, when we were getting ready, she comes from, Southern roots, and it was very difficult to explain to her, hey, as a kid, I didn't have the regular, these are the football players that I idolize. Funnily enough, I didn't get into sports until I was basically an adult. Watching professional sports for me, it was watching Jay and Grant on Taps. That was my whole thing when it came to ghost hunting. I fell in love with Taps. I fell in love with paranormal. I think I was kind of surrounded in a liminal space as a child, so I was always looking for some form of escape, and that just happened to come through the paranormal. And then, as we got into Tales from the Dark, mythology, conspiracies, high strange just as a whole, and I kind of fell in love with the industry. But I'm going to throw it to Brittany for hers.
Okay.
I mean, I really didn't have much of a upbringing in the paranormal or an interest growing up. A lot of times I grew up in a very rural area, and we've talked about it on the podcast. A lot of those things that are paranormal to other people can be normalized or passed down through folklore or superstition and kind of get wrapped up in a whole different umbrella and is either explained away or classified as something different. But for me personally, I always had a fascination with space, space travel, astronauts, I was obsessed with space. But
Okay.
I never really was obsessed with aliens or the thought of, other life out there. I knew it existed. The probability of it existing was very, 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 very high, but I never really thought about it much growing up. And then
What do you say to people who say that space is fake? Have you heard this?
Yes. Yes, we actually have a series that we do that's called For Legal Reasons, This Is All a Joke. And we cover like a whole bunch of just crazy, crazy conspiracy theories. And I have a hard time with that one. I'll just leave it at that because the way I researched growing up, and I went to like space camp in Alabama, and I've seen some of the space shuttles that went into space itself, went through some of the simulations that the astronauts go through in their training. It would be a very, very elaborate ruse from what I've seen. But yeah, that's
well, we also got to see the part of the space shuttle at the Armstrong Museum in Wapakoneta, Ohio.
Yeah,
where,
that's true.
That's his birthplace. We got to see a lot of the things, even from the Soviets, which surprised us that they had Soviet era stuff from the
aeronautics. Yes.
Place. Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I after what happened in 2020, we won't get into all the details of that. And the reason that I'm in Mexico to begin with is because of that. Because I was in Germany, and you take the German mentality and you add that to what was happening at that time, and it just was insanity. Asking for papers, and like, where are your papers? And I'm like, oh, okay, I got a cold chill down my spine. I gotta get out of there. So you add what happened there, and then you add things like September 11th and the Vegas shooting, JFK, all those things. And it's just I don't know anymore, and I think that's what they want anyway. They want you to just kind of demoralize you and question the base and root of reality itself, which can demoralize you, because that's what I think they're trying to do. But I just don't know anymore. You know what I mean? I understand there's a lot of research and scientists, but we know that NASA was started by Werner von Braun. Sorry, I was in Germany, so that's how I pronounce it. Werner von Braun, I guess is how you say it. And it was started by a Nazi. That's just the truth. And it's just so many things that just come into question because of the crumbling of the status quo. It just crumbled around me, and I seen it for what it was. So I don't know if it's a healthy thing for me, but I'm just more skeptical of a lot of things that any type of agency tells me than I used to be.
That's understandable. And that's when it comes to conspiracies, we actually just recently talked about this. On a day-to-day basis, we are inundated with so much data, so much information, through the videos we watch, scrolling through TikTok, just the general information that we see on a day-to-day basis, that it is, especially if you're in high strangeness or especially the conspiracy side of things, it is very easy to get lost in the weeds. And unfortunately, it can have a negative effect, and it did on me there for a minute too. We talked about at the beginning of the year, it was like I didn't know, like, it was very hard for me to turn on the skeptical side of the brain. there for a
Okay.
month. That took some practice of just, trying to make sure that I'm researching the points that these people are making, that I'm seeing these videos on, or the popular trending ones that are coming through, making sure I'm doing my own due diligence for my own
Yeah, of
sake.
course. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
basically, I guess if you were to look at it as a spectrum, there's the middle, there's I believe it, and then there's I don't believe it. Those believe it and don't believe it kind of got pushed in towards the middle, I guess you could say, if you can like, picture it in your head, and is kind of put like I have doubt, and then it also pushed me a little bit closer to the middle in a lot of things. I'm not saying that space is fake because first of all, YouTube won't allow me, and second of all, I just don't necessarily believe it, but I leave the possibility open. Unlike in the future where I would be a little more certain, I'm not as certain as I used to be.
And I think that's a good mentality to have because belief when you talk about John Keel and previous researchers in the field of high strangeness, but especially ufology, uh, one of the most famous quotes that Bob likes to say is, belief is basically the enemy in this sense. And holding that belief can cause you to only view things as one dimensional instead
Okay.
of taking a scope back and saying, okay, this could be connected to the X, Y, or Z. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
that's definitely a good mentality to have, in my opinion, is being able to step back and saying, okay, how does this relate? Where does this information come from? And
True.
how does it affect the
Well,
community, people, and things like that?
yeah, I'm sorry. When I don't see your face, it's a hard time to get the verbal cues as well as I'm used to doing, but we'll get
No,
there.
you're fine.
I'm trying. Um, I don't know. It's like we grew up in America, and there's this sing song kind of thing. This we're number one, red, white, and blue. The eagle, and we did this and we did that, and we're the best. And then you move to a country like I did. I moved to Europe. I moved to Germany for 20 years, and you see the point of view from the European side. Now they do like the bash excessively, and I always would like bash back at certain things, but then it would bring up points where you just like, oh, I never even thought of it that way. You know what I mean? And then you move to Mexico, who is like right next to the biggest superpower in the world at the moment, and they have another perspective. So you get to see things in different lights as well as what happened and during that period of time. Um, it was just the most. I mean, it wasn't like a bad war, but I was in the Kosovo conflict, and I would rather go back to that like 3 times than to go through what we went through during that whole situation. Because for me, liberty and freedom of speech is paramount. It's like without that, I don't have anything else. And for me, I'm sorry to bring it this direction. I don't think you guys are really conspiracy as much as I am, but it's just I couldn't believe the lockstep in which the people just did that, and it frightened me so much that I moved way down here in the Yucatan Peninsula in the middle of nowhere, and started this podcast, and it wasn't. It was not out of necessity. It was just something I've always been interested in. Was the paranormal? I had a poltergeist encounter when I was like 8. I had a hat man when I was like 24, and I've had some stuff out here with Aleutius, which are like force elemental kind of things slash homunculus. And it's just like then I met this guy who's into it, and then we just started this podcast, which eventually split, and he's doing very well. Shout out to him. That's Rye from Codex of Curiosity. Go over and subscribe to his channel as well. And I for the most part, what I enjoy most about the podcasting is to to hear the story, to make the people feel confident in telling me the story and comfortable, and as well as the connection that you get, because it's just I love the perspectives that other people bring that maybe I haven't considered.
No, absolutely, and that's one thing that I truly do enjoy about this field as well, is it's just, eh, you don't really grow nearly as much if you don't make yourself uncomfortable and
Ooh,
expand past your edges, or the box that you put yourself in, the normal stuff that you believe, questioning that, and also just having those open conversations about other people's worldview has definitely expanded my personal boundaries and what I thought wouldn't be possible or could be possible. but especially in this field. And I think it's a wonderful thing, and I think it's a wonderful side effect for podcasting in general, not just learning, but just being able to expand that worldview.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. What is it? Has there been anything that's come across your guys' field of view where you seem to be a little bit more on the skeptical side? If I'm jumping the gun on that, please correct me. But you seem to be a little bit more, like straight down the middle. This is, this can't be explained with this, and that. Has there anything come across your, during your podcasting of 3 to 4 years, I think you said 4, that has just like set you back and went, oh my God, like what is that?
And initially for me, it was UFOs. I thought UFOs were all bullshit.
Yeah.
End of discussion. I had no interest in them. I had no real belief in them. I grew up right next to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where if we go through every major UFO conspiracy from 1947 to 2024, Wright-Patterson has had some sort of attachment, whether it be through.
Where's that again, Bob? Where's the Wright-Patterson? Where's that
Wright-Patterson in Dayton, Ohio?
Well, technically, Beaver.
Fairborn, Beaver Creek area.
They have installations, like different buildings in the Beaver Creek, Fairborn, and Dayton area. Like they're off-site. Like it's not all one combination of buildings. There's a few different areas.
Yes.
Okay.
So for me, I thought that UFOs were all nonsense, and that if it was there, we would have found it, and that's the end of the discussion. And then I was introduced to the idea of interdimensional beings, and that kind of blew my mind a little bit. And then for me, I was still pretty skeptical about most UFO cases. I thought Bob was always telling the truth about what he thinks he saw, but that was really about it initially. And we had a chance to actually meet Geraldine Sutton, whose father was Lucky Sutton, who was at the Hopkinsville Goblin incident, where they had a UFO crash on their back 40. They got into a firefight with these goblins, aliens, whatever we want to dub them now, and all hell broke loose for an entire evening. I came to her when we went to her home. I came there with we're going to somehow get the aha moment, and we're going to blow this case wide open, and that's going to be the end of it. And this woman convinced me over about a 2.5 hour span that not only did this happen, but that I need to reevaluate and take a strong look at every other case I've ever kind of written off in my reluctance to believe that there's, life beyond man, if that makes sense. And
what's it called? The Hopkinsville? What did you say again, Bob?
The Kelly Hopkinsville incident.
I haven't heard of that one. So I've heard of Rendlesham Forest, and of course, the one in New Mexico, Roswell, of course, that's the most famous. I've heard of a few of them, but I've never heard of that one. I've also heard of Betty and Barney Hill. I've heard of that one, but I haven't heard of that one. It's an interesting.
Yeah, I would
expound a little bit on that.
Yeah, so I would say the Betty and Barney Hill case, along with the Kelly Hopkinsville, if we're looking at just evidence, raw evidence with both military involvement and local police involvement, those two are the ones that you need to take a second look at across the board if you're trying to get into ufology.
Well, it's not just military involvement, it's military dispatchment. Like the fact that they were dispatched to the farm in a very timely manner, might I add. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's odd.
No, so Fort Campbell's right next to Hopkinsville, Kentucky. I mean, Fort Campbell, you're talking, I think it's 30-ish minutes. It might be a little further than that. I don't really remember, but it happened back in, it was a
Home of Air Assault. I'm a former U.S. Army veteran, so yeah, Home of Air Assault. Yeah,
it was in 1955. So basically what had happened was August 21st, 1955, there were 5 adults, 7 children at the home in Kelly.
The Sutton farm.
The Sutton family farm. And the gist of what happens is that there was a craft that crashed. These small creatures were peeking in the kids' windows, terrifying them, knocking on the door,
tapping on the windows.
Very, very much almost, you could almost attribute it to the trickster element that we see pop up
time and time again
all across the world. Yeah, time and time again. And this was the rural South. These were people. They were carnival workers. They were hard workers. They didn't have a lot to go around, so they kind of took it as, we're under attack right now, and we have to protect our family, and we're going to die trying. And a full-on firefight broke out. The sheriff showed up. The MPs showed up at one point. There is some sources say that the CIA dispatched some people out. That's something I haven't been able to confirm, and Geraldine also couldn't confirm for us. There was blood that was spilled that was allegedly collected by the MPs. Glowing blood, and it was a full-on firefight. There's evidence that this firefight took place. Some people say it was owls, but again, when I urge all your listeners to go and listen to our Kelly Hopkinsville episode with Geraldine.
Yeah, go do that.
We've done a few of them. The way she explains it, and you get to kind of know her family when you're there in person, you realize these weren't people who, these were folks who lived in the deep South, who traveled the country. They grew up there. They know what an owl looks like, especially in rural Kentucky.
Of course.
These weren't owls, and it scared them enough that, like I said, they got into a full-fledged firefight. And
they had nothing to gain from fabricating. That's the thing you have to look at with a lot of cases in high strangeness is what, does someone have something to gain? Do they have some kind of ulterior motive? They had nothing to gain in this situation, and they had a lot to lose. And they did lose a lot. I mean, they lost a lot of their reputation. They were ridiculed by the town, almost driven out. I mean, they were bullied relentlessly for being stupid carnies who didn't know the difference between an owl and a goblin. But they did, and they were affected deeply to the point that her father would not talk about it. I mean, it took tooth and nail and a very obscure writer, which we still haven't found that book, coming to their house to do a singular interview with her father, and to the point where she had to incessantly ask Lucky, like, what happened? Dad, what happened? Why was this person here? And he explained the story and told her, and then never really talked about it again. Her and her brother, who does it's her brother.
I think it's her brother, yeah.
Who does she does like goblin figurines of the actual depictions that were drawn in the police reports from that night. Those two are the only two in their family who talk about this case.
Yeah.
Beforehand, no one else would talk about it at all.
There are still surviving members of the family who they will not
talk about it.
And we have tried tooth and nail. We're lucky enough to consider Geraldine a good friend of ours, and
the sweetest woman you'll ever meet.
No one else that was there that night. They refused to talk about it. They said that it's the kind of past that needs to stay dead. And that to me opened my eyes, because again, I thought we were going to go down, we were going to find some holes in this story, and she schooled me,
6 ways from Sunday, that's for sure.
The entire drive back across Kentucky, I think I stayed silent for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Processing. I just could not believe that this woman had just changed my entire purview when it came to high strangeness and all this.
So you actually drove down there and interviewed her.
Yeah.
Oh, we
wow.
We go deep on these stories.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's respect.
The whole thing of Tales from the Dark. We don't. There's nothing wrong with armchair detectives. We think that there's a huge place for them, but for us, my brain doesn't work in a way if I can read it and tell it to you in an interesting fashion. I have to go there. Like we went to Skinwalker Ranch. We did a documentary at a
haunted
penitentiary.
You want the Skinwalker Ranch?
Yeah.
Okay.
We went to Point Pleasant. We spent nights out at the Mothman homes. We go to these places, and it's
you go caving and all throughout Kentucky, West Virginia. We do a lot.
Yeah, and that's kind of our whole thing is it's real world stories from actual encounters, and we go and we validate or invalidate these claims the best that we can. Unfortunately, some of the stuff that happened 50 years ago, it's a completely different landscape than it was, as fast as change here in the States. 5 years go by and the building couldn't even be there anymore. It could be a shopping plaza. But the places that we can go, if we can preserve that history, we can go there and say, yeah, this does feel this type of way. That's what we're kind of here for. And that's
the energy does linger in a lot of these places that we go to.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
one thing I've learned throughout the years.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've definitely heard about that. I've experienced myself. Like there is a feeling. It's hard to describe. So if you're going into Point Pleasant, West Virginia for the Mothman things, would you consider Mothman a cryptid, or what would you consider Mothman?
I think Mothman is the single most misdescribed person in all of the
That's a good way to put it.
So my thing is, I'm going to stick with cryptid, but I'm going to correct everyone on the Flatwoods Monster. Flatwoods Monster is an alien, even though it's called the Flatwoods Monster. That's where I think people get the two confused with. I say cryptids solely because the sightings didn't start just with the Scarberries and the Mallets. It actually a week and a half, I believe, before that started with some people that were doing some construction work outside of Point Pleasant. We've also seen quite a few, whether it be at Chernobyl, whether it be in Chicago at the O'Hare Airport, we've Indianapolis Mothman. We've kind of tracked all around the country. It's not just one sighting, and out of the country as well. And this thing goes way before 1967. So I put it in the same realm as, your Bigfoot. I think that there's a dozen different Bigfoots, here in Missouri alone. So I think it's not to say, it's just one being or one creature. Now,
you guys are in Missouri. Okay.
Yeah, we moved to Missouri about a year ago.
Oh, that's where I wanted to move. That's where I wanted to go when I was leaving Germany, but didn't work out that way. I actually I interviewed Linda Siegman. Have you ever heard of her?
I don't believe so.
She had quite an interesting Mothman encounter where she was also it wasn't just the Mothman. She also seen like a light like a ball like over top of like an orb the size of like a Volkswagen Beetle, like pulsating and getting, like she was saying, like some kind of downloads, and like she went through, I don't know if you guys feel about regressive therapy, and like a lot of this stuff is coming out more for her. And I don't think she's that kind of person as well, but that's when I mean, I've always heard the name Mothman, there's the book about it. And it's just like I'm saying, for me, it's like, it's a learning experience as well. And, I try to take the people at face value to what they're telling me. But, there's sometimes you can tell there's people who are just kind of, not exactly telling the entire truth. Maybe some of it's fabricated. I think they have had some type of experience. I don't know what that may be. But I found her to be extremely, I guess you would say, genuine. So that's interesting. What is do you guys get into cryptids at all? Your Bigfoot, your Dogmans, your Wendigos? I mean, have you gone and done any of that type of research, or squatching as they call it?
Yeah, I mean, we have a series called United Strangeness of America, where we dive into a handful of cryptids, handful of paranormal cases, handful of UFO cases for each state. And we've gone Ohio grassman hunting before.
Oh God, that was a night.
We've been in the area where the Kentucky Dogman.
What's the grassman?
It's basically it's like an amalgamation of all the worst traits of Sasquatch.
Yeah, I think like the swamp Sasquatches, like the stinky, mucky.
Oh, the skunk ape.
Yeah,
sort of, but then bigger than the skunk ape and much more territorial. Is the
covered
claim.
In grass,
maybe like the wood booger, maybe a little.
Sort of, yeah. If you're familiar with the yucca man at all, it's very close to the yucca man, just incredibly foul smelling.
You guys are much more versed in this than I am. This is fantastic. You're like, it's more of you guys telling me what things are because of what you know, and I'm going, oh, I have to look into all these. Fantastic. Wow. And so you want to see the grassman. What was the experience there? Because Brittany, is that correct, Brittany?
Yes.
Yeah, she kind of went like, "Ooh, that was a great." What was it about that experience that made you have that reaction to what Bob was saying?
I forgot that we went and did that. We basically we basically went out to, I don't even remember what state park it was. Do you?
Is it Salt Fork?
It's Fork something.
Yeah. So it's, if you're in Ohio, I know it's
near Hocking Hills.
Yeah, it's in between Columbus and Hocking Hills.
Yeah. So there's a state park out there that if you look up the Grassman, Ohio Grassman, it should pop up for sightings. But we had basically gone out there at night and just traversed. We got out of the car. We did live streaming of just traversing through the woods and trying to find this thing, doing calls,
wood knocking, you name it. We were trying everything that they tell you not to do. We were doing.
Yeah, we went to some deep woods out there too. I remember I fell up the hill because it was slightly raining that night.
Yes,
it was a good night.
Yeah, Brittany falls up hills. I fall down hills going into caves.
It's opposites attract, like Paula Abdul said back in the late '80s. There,
exactly. But yeah, that's our whole thing. We kind of go out and we look for these things, especially if we cover them in an episode and we're like, this is interesting, or this thing is so insane, I have to see it for myself. I mean,
well, have you seen anything?
So I have, it's been out long enough now that I can kind of tell the audience. We did a documentary last year called Phantom Farm, and that was at the Randolph County Infirmary in Winchester, Indiana. And this was Brittany's first real, like, full production ghost hunt. It was our first time doing a full documentary. It's up on Prime now. And
Oh, wow. Cool.
the thing that stood out to me, again, I've been doing this for, I was 12, 13 years old. Up until this point, the only thing ghost wise I've ever really seen had been a door opening up. And that's it. I mean, there was nothing else impressive, nothing else crazy for me, but I always had that innate belief that there's something that happens after death. And that's where my brain always kind of stuck. And during our filming at the at Randolph County, we had something run right by us. It's on camera. You can hear it. Our editor went through it probably 5,000 times.
If not more. He was obsessed.
We sent it out to every audio expert we could. We showed it to everyone. Hey, what's your opinion on this? What's your thought? What could it be? How could we have faked this? Well, the good thing is every person that was in the building had a camera on, so there was no way to fake it. So my brain went to, well, how did Randolph County fake this? Because there's no way we caught the evidence of a lifetime. We've been back, I think, twice since. I can't figure out how they could have faked it. And it's one of the things that, to me, if you're looking for evidence of the unknown, I would never go as far as saying we caught evidence of life after death. I'm not Zach Bagans. I don't have an ego that large, but I will say we did capture evidence of the unknown. We spent hours upon hours debunking this. There is no debunking it. If someone can,
we welcome it with open arms.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
That's happened. We've also had Brittany had a UFO encounter, which is my hands down favorite thing to discuss. And then
oh yeah, that's cool. That sounds fantastic. Brittany, please, like, I'm all ears.
But the last thing we had happen in a cave in Somerset, Kentucky, we walked up on a bear. So that happened too.
That happened too. So basically I was out traveling. I think it was like between 8 or 9 p.m. at night. I was in between Dayton, Ohio and Point Pleasant. There's like a big stretch of land that really doesn't have much to look at. But I was out there one night and I was by myself and I was driving and I was driving through this little town. And long story short, I saw the 5 dome lights outside my car. Like my window was cracked and I saw these dome lights. So it wasn't a reflection that kind of breathed in and out. They were in a diagonal. And I called Bob and they went out. I called Bob and basically it started this chase where I was like, I'm going to find this thing. I checked the whole area I had Bob checking for airports actually around to see if there's anything that could be around. There wasn't. I checked behind the field where this thing was shown. There were absolutely no lights, no stadium lights, no Chinese lanterns, nothing that could have explained the lights that I saw. And then I saw this thing 2 more times. And we actually did a full episode on the podcast where basically Bob interviewed me like a contactee. And so that happened, I think, 3 years ago now.
And that was in the same night that you seen him the other 2 times?
Yes. So basically the time period that I saw it 3 times was I saw it initially, went and parked. It was right beside like an O'Reilly's or something. I called Bob and I was looking around trying to see stadium lights or anything. There was nothing. I drove down the back roads. I looked at my maps, drove down the back roads to see if I could go behind where the store was. It was a huge open field, no lights, nothing, not even street lights. And I saw this thing again by the moon. It was 3 lights kind of joined together, same breathing effect. It was like an orangish reddish color, maybe more orangish yellowish. And it was breathing in and out like a RGB effect, that breathing effect. And then I couldn't get on camera the first 2 times. And then the third time in our research of other strange encounters, we noticed that a lot of times these things, whether it be cryptid, paranormal, or UFO, congregate near water and especially moving water.
Yes.
And there was actually a pretty major river nearby where I was at, and there were a couple creeks branching off of it. So I took a back road by a creek heading towards that main river. And I actually got that thing on camera. It was filmed with my phone. So it's not great quality, but it was weird. It was a weird night. So, but after I caught it on camera, that third time I saw it, I didn't see it again. until was it like 6 months later?
Yeah. I'd say 5-6 months later.
So I didn't see it again that night. I went home. Bob interviewed me the next day, trying to keep all the details in mind of like, were there any side effects? Did I have any feelings, any certain smells, or anything like that? And so all that's in that episode. But about 6 months later, this road that we take, um, this town that I was at was about 20 minutes off the main highway to get to Point Pleasant from where we lived in Ohio. And we were coming back from Point Pleasant one night, and I was driving, and Bob saw these things.
Oh
Same
wow.
color. I think it was either 3 or 4 that you saw, and same kind of breathing effect. And we pulled off on the side of the road, couldn't get him to show again, trying to communicate with whatever's out there, couldn't get him to show again, but Bob actually saw the same thing too. So it was weird. It's a weird
Well,
coincidence.
at least you have like your best friend in the world there with you to kind of collaborate your story. That must be a bit of a sigh of relief in thinking that that you're not crazy or something like that. It must help.
Well, especially like being researchers in this field, because you're always like, does he actually believe me? Like, I know what I went through, but do you actually
Right.
believe me? And then he saw him like, I told you so.
Right. So now that must be very interesting, Brittany. Like now you're on the other end of the questioning, and then kind of like how these people feel, and then you must also then imagine, because it's happened to you, that how they feel when they're being ridiculed. That must be an interesting perspective to have.
Oh, absolutely. And but going beyond just the experience that I had with a UFO, I'm not saying I definitely didn't get abducted or anything like that. It was just a weird light that I couldn't explain. And nothing that I knew of, no plane, no military tech, no Chinese lantern. I keep saying Chinese lantern because that's what one of our friends tried to say it was until he saw the video and he was like, yeah, actually, I can't explain that.
Oh,
So
okay. Is the video up on your YouTube channel?
it is. It's unlisted. I'll have Bob slid it to you.
Okay,
Um,
cool.
but yeah, we on top of that experience, I also grew up in a small town, and like I said before, I grew up in a very rural area. So you have that small town mentality of different isn't always good, and so I saw firsthand the way that if someone was different in that small town area or experienced something
Oh,
different, I saw the havoc that it could have on people
wow.
and
I
families
never
and
even
things like
thought
that.
of that. And that's never even occurred to me because I grew up, I'm from Baltimore. So
Yeah.
it's, big metropolitan area. But I also lived in Pennsylvania for a year in the middle of nowhere. I mean,
Yeah.
a town called Mapleton had 300 people in it. Very racist place. It was, and I can just imagine like I've seen this thing, and then like everyone knows everybody, so then like you're getting these like sideways looks and things of that nature. It must be terrifying for these people, which is I think doing what we both what us three do. Um, it provides like a place for people to just kind of feel like they can just kind of like just take their hat off and kind of relax a little bit. So I think that helps a lot too, because a lot of these people, it's kind of cathartic just to like be able to tell somebody and have them actually listen without waiting for you to stop to ridicule what they're saying or to question it. You just seen this or not. So that's a very interesting perspective that I've never even considered, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and that's part of the work too, because you know when we were talking about the Sutton family, that's what happened to them. They were ridiculed for their encounter. It was different than what people in the town had ever experienced. It went beyond their scope of explanation. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
small towns, especially small towns in Appalachia, which is where I grew up, have explanations, like I said, either through folklore, through superstition, or the major one is through religion. And
Yes, of
so
course.
if it doesn't fit within that scope for a lot of people, they choose to ignore it and
Or it's
believe
a demon, or it's a demon of some sort. All
it's a demon, or they also think that they're just full of it, and they cast these people out as liars and fibbers and
and then you
ridicule.
also right. Then you also I'm sorry, Bernie, but you also have the other form in which people will then take their religion and then connect the two together and be like, well, it's you know, the Bigfoot is just a Nephilim. You know what I mean? And I don't know either way, and honestly, I don't think anyone knows. but there's a lot of people who will hit that hard from that angle as well, and they have a lot of some
Evidence.
people have evidence to connect it to too. They not
Oh,
only
no,
read the Bible and things of that
absolutely.
nature, so that's interesting as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's one thing that I haven't really started looking into myself. I know Bob's looked into a little bit, and there's been a few people we've talked to who come from that angle, and it's very interesting for me because again, it goes back to the conversation of expanding our own worldview. Where that might not normally fit in my scope, it's something I can digest and process and research myself and expand what I know or what I think I
Right,
know.
Well,
right.
when you look at the ideology of one man's angels, another man's alien, I think that kind of explains it the best way humanly possible. And just to kind of piggyback on like lives being ruined, as Brittany was discussing, I mean, look at Woodrow Derenberger.
Yeah,
That man has done more inadvertently through trials and tribulations of ufology. Being one of the godfathers, if we're being 100% honest, having his
of
entire life,
contactees.
yeah, having his entire life destroyed for going on a local radio station and discussing.
Wow.
Hey, this is what I saw. This was, for those who might not be familiar, Woodrow Derenberger was believed to be the initial sighting of the Indrid cold, which has nothing to do with Mothman, with the exception of proximity. People often misinterpret that because it happened in Parkersburg,
Correct.
right outside of Parkersburg, and Parkersburg's an hour-ish from Point Pleasant. So people often kind of mold them all together into the one big strange happenings. It was part of the UFO flap.
Well, they also mold it together because of John Keel and who was the other researcher at the time in that area?
Oh, you asked me too fast.
I did. I forgot it too. Oh Lord. Well, there's another researcher in that West Virginia,
I'm pretty sure
Ohio.
The Ohio River Valley. He founded the New Saucerian. It's not Andy Colvin, but he was connected with Colvin. I'll think of it after we get off the air.
That was me trying to think of Ron Moorhead. And let me say this to you guys real quick to try to melt your guys' butter a little bit. You guys are very good at what you do. I can hear it. Very good back and forth, like banter and support and the yes and. You guys are very good at what you do. You're a good team. That's my 2 cents. I think you guys are really good at what you do.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I want to get to this running water. What is your guys' feeling, or why have you come to that realization, or has it been something that's been said that you were able to verify to a certain extent?
So it kind of goes back to John Keel. If we're being, I think John Keel is that's where I get a lot of my inspiration from. This guy who he's like the George Knapp of yesteryear, if we want to give him a good title. Went and he really dove headfirst into the Ohio River Valley anomaly, and when I say that, I mean 1965 through 68-ish, the UFO flap, the Men in Black sightings, Mothman, all of that kind of stuff. But he wrote a book that was called The Eighth Tower, where he kind of goes through a more historical, religious scope of high strangeness. And one thing that he points out consistently is water. Well, so Brittany and I started to notice rather quickly that a lot of these cases were covering, and we actually had a Bigfoot encounter that we didn't mention. Hilariously enough, it's kind of weird to
kind of miss that one.
We do so much that we forget. That also happened next to water. What we started to notice while doing a lot of this research is, these things, not only do they come in threes consistently, we're almost always seeing where there's a UFO, there's probably a Bigfoot, and where there's a Bigfoot, probably a few blocks away, there's a poltergeist. And you find this, when we found it the first time, you're like, okay, interesting. You find it the 68th time, you're like, okay, this is now a pattern. We can now identify this. And again, we're not at all saying we coined this term. We did not discover this. But through our own research, we have been able to deduce this is a pattern that goes pretty consistently. Now, we can go as far as saying, water can be powering the portals to the next dimension. That's a very common theory and interpretation of why this is happening. But then there's also the obvious one that I love, which is just like, you have to have water to survive. And that's why it happens next to water. There's also could this just be a coincidence that there's, as human beings, when we first got here, we all congregated around water.
Right.
We required water for survival, then water for trade. It wasn't until the interstate system that we really had the ability to
go
move away from water.
Yeah,
so,
to traverse terrain. Yeah, I got yes, of course.
Yeah, so could that be the explanation? That's entirely possible. But what I can say, just without a shadow of a doubt, I encourage all of your listeners who, if they find something that happens next to a major river, broaden your scope past just UFOs, because unfortunately, people in their field like to stay in their field. You know, it's very much when it comes to high strangeness, there's this take your ball and go home mentality of, I'm a Bigfoot guy. I don't give a damn about UFOs. I don't care if Bigfoot was dropped off by a UFO. The important player in this is Bigfoot. I mean, we've seen people die on that sword, unfortunately. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we are with the water thing. Brittany, do you have anything to add?
No, just the only thing I wanted to add was that going back to the religion, I mean, water has had a significance in almost in every major religion as far back as we know. But for me, especially where it kind of reared its head, I guess, in the research is through Native American lore and through the beliefs that were passed down through their generations. And I cannot for the life of me think about the specifics that brought me there, but I did want to at least make an ode to, I know that through research of Native American lore and folklore, I did come to that conclusion as well.
Yeah. And now there are also some who draw the conclusion of, we literally wash away our sins in water. And people who are pretty adamant that these are all evil beings, that if it's not of Christ, it is evil, end of discussion. You'll hear that brought up in some smaller circles that, okay, well, especially when you're looking at Appalachia, every creek, every small stream or water most likely has had 1,000 baptisms in the past 20 years, if we're being realistic. That's just kind of how you can't really throw a stone in Appalachia and not hit 3 churches. That's just how it works. So there are those out there who are so adamant that these things are of evil that when you're being baptized, you're washing away your sin, you're coming up reborn. That these things are attracted, they're attracted to the sin, and that's where these things are coming from. Now, we don't subscribe to that in any way, shape, or form, but there are those out there who make that connection, who realize this, okay, this is happening around water. This has to be the explanation because I have no other logical explanation. And my thing with religion, I love the idea of religion. I hate what religion does to ideas. And that's how I've always approached that conversation is, I'm an ordained minister. I grew up Catholic. I've read both the Old and New Testament more times than I can count. It's not that I'm not a faithful man. I just happen to be, a ritual magician at 30. That came out of absolutely nowhere for me. And it was one of those things that you can't bring up one without having to acknowledge the other. I'm not saying that that's, that they're wrong for thinking that. Everyone's allowed their own world purview. I just believe personally, if you allow yourself to get so alienated and indoctrinated into your own world purview, you might miss out on what the next person's trying to tell you that could change your life for the better.
Right. I think you should definitely keep it in mind. It's like, it's nothing to like, just go there, either way. It's better just to keep it in the totality of everything, because we're trying to basically get down. Why are we into this? We're into it because we're trying to find out what's going on. Like, what is this? It doesn't fit, the normal scientific narrative. It doesn't do a lot of things. And, when you're only looking at, the world or this phenomenon or phenomenons through only one lens, I think you're missing something. It's very possible.
Yeah, I think so too.
So I will be remiss if I'm not going to ask you this question before we get you guys up out of here. You said that you went to Skinwalker Ranch. Could you go ahead and just kind of tell me what's going on? Because I know, like, it's not just that ranch. There's also one next to it called, I think it's called Space Wolf, if I'm not mistaken.
So Space Wolf owns Skinwalker Ranch.
Oh, okay.
That's the new owners from, what was his name?
Robert
Bigelow. Yeah.
Bigelow sold it. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but that's who owns Space Wolf. I'll send you some pretty cool pictures. We actually definitely weren't allowed to be there, and we were still up on the border taking photos.
We did not go like onto the actual premises because when you go to the entrance of Skinwalker Ranch, there's a million cameras and so many no trespassing signs, barbed wire. I'm pretty sure there was electric fencing, the whole nine. But it was weird. It was a weird night. I can tell you that.
It can't be there for nothing. I mean, let's go ahead and put that into it. I mean, with all that money just in the signs and the cameras, there's something going on.
Yeah. It's a weird place. There were definitely some lights dancing around the sky. Nothing like it wasn't nearly as bright as like what I described that happened out in Ohio, but
Okay.
definitely some weird lights. Some weird interaction we had with a dog that I'm not 100% sure was actually a dog.
Oh,
We basically in rural areas, I don't know how often you've been out in country like that, but a lot of people have guard dogs. And it doesn't matter if you're in Appalachia or cross country, it's just rural areas in general. A lot of people train their dogs to be aggressive for people they don't recognize or things like that.
mm-hmm.
And then they're outside dogs.
I'm gonna tie
And
one to my truck.
yeah, exactly. Might need one, but this one was when we were driving by, we were on a dirt road that had multiple houses on it, multiple people lived here, but there were also a few abandoned houses on the way into Skinwalker. And as we drove by the first time, it tried to bite at our tires. It was chasing, it was barking at us. We go like 700 feet, maybe 800 feet down to the gate, turn around. It's like around a little bend. So we couldn't see the house where this dog was at. We get turned around, we come back, the dog's gone. We do a couple more loops. We come back the second time, the dog's there, and then it has a friend, another dog. And then the first dog is barking again. The other dog isn't really reacting. We go back, we get turned around, and then both of them are gone when we come back. And then we had done some laps around the entire perimeter, which the facility itself, like the area, the acreage is much smaller than I thought it was actually going to be. Because in the documentaries we watched, it looks vast,
Huge, yeah. Yes.
expansive. It's not. I mean, it's a big piece of land. It'd be a nice piece of land to own, but it's not like
It's not a 4.6 type of ranch. It's rather small.
yeah. So through the laps that we did around the whole perimeter, which were public roads, so it wasn't like we were in Skinwalker Ranch trespassing, but we had come back and we stopped out on the dirt road to the entrance. And during that time, we were standing outside the car, looking at the stars, trying to see if we saw any weird lights. And I heard something come barreling down the hill behind us, behind the car. And I told Bob, get the F in the car. We're getting out of here. This thing sounded huge. Like it sounded like a black bear rolling down the hill, kind of big.
Okay.
And we get in the car, we speed off, and we see the dog chasing us. And we get a couple miles down the road. It's like 5 miles away from the little town that Skinwalker is by. And the dog was gone. Like we hadn't seen it for a few miles at that point. And when we get to the stoplight, basically I told Bob that I think we experienced something weird, and he said the SW word. And as soon as he said that, we started hearing the dog bark.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
I told him to get the F out of there, and we would not be coming back that night. And we left, and we drove to California from Utah. So that was fun.
So you just got up out of there. You said this is too weird for us.
Yeah, we went from one weird to another. We went from Skinwalker Ranch, which is in the Uinta Basin, out to Mount Shasta.
Okay.
We went up to Mount Shasta, had some fun up there. But I don't know if you have time, but if you'd like, we can share our Bigfoot encounter.
Sure, absolutely. No, please.
In the woods.
Okay.
I'm going to the first part to Brittany because it was funnily enough, it was her like first video on her channel she was going to start. We ended up amalgamating it all together to Tales from the Dark, but it's in true Tales from the Dark fashion. We started with a very specific stop point. We had a very good idea of what we wanted to do, a debunking style video that turned into absolute nonsense with the Randonautica app.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Randonautica app.
I think I am. It's the one where you just kind of you follow it. It tells you to go to certain places and you get clues or things like that.
So the way we were using the app, I haven't used it in a few years. It was literally that was the start, like at the start of Tales from the Dark. So it's been 4 years, but basically it generates coordinates from you local to your area.
Once you set an intention.
Yeah, you set an intention, and when you set your intention, there's no communication between you and the phone. So like you're sitting there thinking about the color red, you don't type it in, you don't let the phone know or the app know what you're thinking about. It just makes coordinates. So that's its whole job, is just give you coordinates.
Okay.
So it usually does it within like a 30-mile radius of your, you give it your GPS location. And so we were doing a video on this because it had controversy, because a couple of kids were actually using the app and found a cadaver. They found a
Wow.
dead person, and they the parents were very concerned about the safety of using this app because they found that body.
Mhm.
And so we were covering it because of that controversy. And the first two were weird. I think I thought of a color the first time, which took us to like a red umbrella and a woman wearing a red shirt. And then the second time I said like lost or abandoned maybe, and it took us to like this abandoned old schoolhouse out in the middle of the like farm. Like there was no reason why this abandoned schoolhouse should be like in the middle of a field, but it was.
Now, initially, we did try and explain it away, but like, okay, if your intention is seeing something red, your mind is going to grasp every single thing that's red. You know,
Yeah.
it's simple wordplay and word association. So we kind of after the first stop, I think we were kind of like a little arrogant. Like, okay, we have figured this out. We cracked the code.
Yeah, it's just your brain, you know, making association with what you want to see. Well, the last coordinate, I think I said, and this is in the Randonautica video. This is on the Tales from the Dark YouTube. So this whole adventure is actually there on YouTube. But the third thing, I think I said I wanted to see something ghostly. And the coordinates took us into this Tip City golf course, or not golf course, disc golf course.
Yeah, frisbee golf. Yeah,
and there were the way it works in Ohio is there's like stretch of woods. So you have square farmland or rectangular farmland, and then you have big stretch of woods. And in this area, there was like an L-shaped stretch of woods, and it was pretty thick. I mean, it was spring, summertime, so the underbrush was very thick, hard to get through, and it was by a pretty major river. So we go to these coordinates. The coordinates are in the middle of that brush, in the middle of these trees. And so we actually had to go through, like, there was no path. We had to kind of cut through the thorns and stuff to get to this exact spot. And as we are walking into this area, we're past the tree line now.
Well, initially we found like some like used women's underwear and some other stuff in like a pile before we went into the woods.
Yeah, and that's on film. So Bob was filming with a camera, and we had walked into this area, saw the discarded clothing, and then what did you see, Bob?
So to preface this, I'm around 6'5", 6'6". I'm a rather large individual, and as I'm walking through the brush, I freeze in place, and the hair on my neck stood up, cold-blooded, just terror, because I saw something larger than me. And again, I'm 6'5". This thing I would say 9.5, 10 feet tall.
Oh my God, dude!
It moved so quickly, my brain didn't compute what I had seen. I knew that something extremely large moved in front of me. My brain goes to, it's a bear. Then I'm like, oh no, you're in Midwestern Ohio. There is no bear.
There shouldn't be a bear. Yeah.
Now, granted, Ohio is known for people, having these exotic pets and letting them loose in places they shouldn't be. But
I can tell you from experience, a bear would not move that fast through the woods.
Now, this thing moved. I mean, when I say quickly, I mean if you blink, you miss it. And I saw it move so quickly. Like I said, it terrified me, because I'm not used to seeing things in the wild. I grew up hunting. It's very rare. Because again, now when I say grew up hunting, I grew up in Ohio hunting, so we don't really do bears and stuff. But it's very rare in the wild to see something larger than myself. And when you're seeing that large, moving that quickly, your brain goes to, I'm about to die. This is bad. I was terrified. Now we have it on camera. It's in the Randonautica video that Brittany referenced. We have slowed this down. I've sent this. We posted it in probably 100 different Facebook groups, video editing groups, asking people to slow it down, help us gauge how big this thing is.
Bigfoot groups,
Bigfoot
hunting groups. That was a big one.
Yeah, and now every hunter we showed this to said that's not a bear. I don't know what that is. That's way too big to be a deer. Even if a deer was standing up on its hind legs, it's too big to be a deer. It's closer to like a grizzly if it was standing straight up, but
it's not thick enough.
Yeah, it wasn't thick enough, and it moved so fast. There was no way it could have been a bear. And so the Bigfoot groups in this, I've seen something similar to this, but no one's ever been able to show us a video of something similar. Like I said, we've slowed it down. I've sent it over to video analysts. There's no way that we didn't create this in After Effects or something. And the gist of it is this thing had to be between 9 to 10.5 feet tall. And it moved so fast that I think it was within 6 frames. It was gone.
Wow.
Like, it doesn't really make sense. We revisited the area a handful of times trying to make sense of it. We figured out how tall this thing had to be by me standing in that area. Brittany standing back to where I was. This thing
Filming, yeah.
We filmed it for the Facebook group, the Tales from the Dark Facebook group. This thing was massive. I mean, it was hands down the biggest thing I've ever seen. But it's one of those. It's not like the encounters that you hear where someone walks up on a Bigfoot and they can say, "Okay, that's definitely a Sasquatch. That's what this is." It was so quick. It's like we startled it that we didn't know it was there, or didn't know we were there.
Whatever it was, the thing that convinced me that this really was something weird, other than the speed, because the speed was very alarming, is when I slowed it down, and it's very hard to see because it's very green. Like the area is thick, a thick brush. The trees are in full bloom. It's very hard to see.
And it's never the same when you record it too. It's always looks different. It's just not the same.
Yeah. But when we slowed it down and we actually looked at it frame by frame, I could make out an elbow of something. It looks like an elbow, and there's a Gatorade bottle, which kind of helps us determine how much time it took for this thing to take off, that got flipped. It was like it was in its hand or paw or whatever it was, or on it or something, and it gets flipped in the air and lands. And while it's being flipped, you see what looks like an elbow in the video, and it was weird. It was a very weird.
Well, and some of the hunters we showed it to said this is something pumping its arms to run.
Yeah, we literally took it. So we spent a lot of time in Kentucky, and especially Eastern Kentucky. And we took it to some good old boys that we had talked to for a few trips prior to this. And we showed them the video. We showed it slowed down. We showed them the original. We literally gave them the iPad and said, "Okay, here, look at this. Do you see anything?" Yeah. These guys had spent their whole life hunting.
Bear hunting in rural Appalachia, that they know
their critters.
What they're looking for, yes.
And they could not explain it. They had no idea what it was. And that was also another moment of like, this was freaking weird.
We'll explain the best part when we left and talked to the 2 golfers that were there.
Oh my gosh. So okay, so we saw this thing. We're like, what was that? So we went and looked at where this thing ran from, and then we went further in because the coordinates where this thing ran off to was going like basically towards where the coordinates were. So we kept going. We didn't see it again.
Okay.
And so we came out. We went to the coordinates. I don't think there was anything there.
Well, there was like an oddly rounded area, almost looked like a place that could have been like a nest where this thing could have been sleeping.
Yeah, that was weird. Some footprints, but it was also like a lot of leaves on the ground. It was kind of muddy, so the indent was definitely there. It was definitely a little wet, but because of all the leaves that hadn't decomposed yet, it was hard to make out actual footprints. But we had gone to the coordinates. I think we may have saw an item or something there. It would be in the video if we did. Wow. But we left. We go out into the parking lot, and there's 2 guys who just got off the disc golf course. And Bob starts off how he usually starts off when we go to these areas, and it's like, "Hey, have you seen anything weird out here? Do you know of any like weird stories, of this area?" And one guy just wasn't having any of our shit. He just walked off. He was like, "Nope," and then walked back to his car. The guy that was with him, older guy, said, "Yeah, actually, I knew this old man who used to sit right up the road, which up the road was up the driveway by the same river that went by this area." And said he would come here to play disc golf course, and every day, or walk the park or something, every day this guy would be sitting by the river in a lawn chair. And one day he asked him, "Why are you sitting there?" And he said,
now this had gone on for like a year plus before he finally, and every day this older guy was sitting in this lawn chair. I want to say even said he had a shotgun with him.
Yeah, some kind of firearm. And he finally asked him, "Why are you sitting here? What are you doing?" And he said he had seen Bigfoot out there, and that he was waiting for him, and he was going to catch him, or he was going to shoot him or something. And he was absolutely convinced that it existed, but not only that it existed, but that he had seen it and that it was still in that area.
Yeah. Then afterwards, we checked BFRO, and there's a mother and 2 children who had a Bigfoot sighting at the exact same location. Again, all of this was unknown to us beforehand.
We had never even looked into Bigfoot really before this incident, and it led us down that rabbit hole. But yeah, BFRO, that the follow-up that I did in that video, I think I actually showed some of the BFRO
Wow,
encounters that were on the website.
that's incredible.
Crazy time.
This is a crazy question. I'll ask you anyway. Is there any way you guys can send me that video? Maybe the original and the slowdown. I can put it at the end of the episode and make sure that everyone can go over to your channel.
I do not know if we have that.
Yeah, I can send you the link to the video, and you're welcome to cut it up, like use like YouTube MP3 or whatever to download it.
Okay, great. That'd be great.
Yeah, I don't think we have the originals anymore, because I mean, this is like Brittany said, it's been years. But the actual video is still up on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so you give me permission to use it. Okay, that'd be great. All right. Wow. Well, we went from conspiracies to all the way back to Bigfoot again in this app that you were talking about. That's going to be fun. To look at, like I said, I've heard about it, and I've heard about videos about it, and it's just that's a really odd one. Do people still use this app?
As far as I know, yeah. I mean, it's still in the App Store. I just had another interview I did solo, and one of the ladies that was interviewing me, she looked it up and said it was still in the App Store. So I think it's still actively being used.
I think so as well, yeah.
Okay, wow. Okay, one more time. Could you please go ahead and promote all your things, and and then do me a favor at the end, wait around so I can see if all the recordings went through.
Yeah, no problem. So Bob and Brittany from Tales from the Dark podcast and YouTube channel. If it's a podcast network, we're on it. Google, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Pandora. Yeah. If you have a podcatcher, you can find Tales from the Dark, and then the Tales from the Dark YouTube channel. I actually have 2 videos I'm working on right now. One UFO based missing person, and then another one is going to be a pretty big deep dive into the Indiana Demon House. House of 200 demons. So that's youtube.com/Tales from the Dark.
That's fantastic. I want to thank both of you all very much for coming on the Eye of Jupiter and sharing your stories and your tales. It's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you. And please, like I said, stick it around in the green room, and we'll chat a little bit afterwards. So, well, that was enlightening. Tales from the Dark. Go check out that podcast. That must be an amazing podcast. These people are really good at what they do. You can hear that they're very into it. They're very focused on it, and they try to cut out all the details. Not all the details, but try to cut out all the fat to get down to the meat of the situation. And that's just, I love that. And very factual and very punctual, and just they're very professional at what they do. Hopefully one day I'll get there. Anyhow, thank you all for listening to the Eye of Jupiter. And remember, we are the Eye, and we are aware. Love you all very much.
I just fucking saw it again. It's right over here. There it is. That light. There should be another one above it. Fuck you, truck. Get the fuck out of my way. It's right here. There it is. There it is. There it is. There it fucking is. There it fucking is. Oh my god. Oh my fucking god. Am I about to get fucking abducted? I don't know. Let's go. Holy fucking shit. Alright, we're gonna stop right here. Oh, fuck. Full moon tonight, guys. I'm getting close. There it is. That light. There should be another one above it. Fuck you, truck. Get the fuck out of my way. It's right here. There it is. There it is. There it is. There it fucking is. There it fucking is. Oh my god. There it is. That light. There should be another one above it. Fuck you, truck. Get the fuck out of my way. It's right here. There it is. There it is. There it is. There it fucking is.
You have been listening to the Eye of Jupiter podcast. Remember, if you have any strange occurrences or stories or anything you'd like to share, please drop me an email at theeyejupiterpodcast@gmail.com and you'll be on the show. And remember, we are the Eye and we are aware. Thank you.